The grocery line froze when the single dad reached into his worn wallet and paid for a stranger's groceries with his last $10. He didn't know she was a millionaire CEO and that this one act of kindness would change both their lives forever. If stories like this remind you that small moments can rewrite destinies, stay with us, because what happens next will touch your heart in ways you won't expect. And hey, if it moves you, share it with someone who still believes in kindness. The fluorescent lights hummed above the checkout lanes of Riverside Market, a tiny grocery store that smelled faintly of coffee, detergent, and tired lives. Outside, the December wind howled against the glass doors, blowing snow in restless spirals. Ethan Miller tightened his grip on the worn leather wallet in his hand, thumbing through the last few bills. He had exactly $10 left. 10. Just enough for a packet of instant noodles, a half-gallon of milk, and the cheapest loaf of bread he could find. His 8-year-old daughter, Lily, clung to his sleeve, her wool hat slipping over one eyebrow. "Are we okay, Dad?" she whispered. He smiled, though his eyes betrayed the fatigue of a man who hadn't had a full night's sleep in months. "We're okay, Bug. We always find a way." He had been saying that since the day her mother died. The line inched forward. A few feet ahead, a woman in a cream cashmere coat stood out like sunlight in a gray room. Her hair was the color of expensive champagne, swept into a neat twist, and the diamond on her wrist caught the light every time she moved. She placed her groceries, organic produce, fine coffee, a bouquet of white tulips, on the belt. But when she handed the cashier her card, something strange happened. The machine beeped, declined. She frowned, tried again, declined, again. The line behind her began to murmur, impatient sighs echoing down the aisle. "Ma'am, maybe try another card," the young cashier said nervously. The woman's hands trembled slightly as she searched her purse. Ethan didn't think. He just stepped forward, pulling a single crumpled 10 from his wallet. "Here," he said, voice low but steady. "Take this and ring it up. It's fine." The woman turned toward him, startled. Up close, her eyes were tired, the kind of tired that comes from holding 1,000 things together too long. "You don't have to," she began. "I know," he said gently, "but I want to." He placed the bill on the counter before she could argue. The cashier hesitated, then rang it through. The total blinked across the screen, $9.86. Ethan gave a small, crooked smile. Guess it was meant to be. The woman tried to hand him her business card. "Please let me repay you. I'll find a way." He shook his head, slipping his hands into his jacket pockets. "No need. Just pass it on someday." And with that, he took Lily's hand and walked out into the cold. Snowflakes caught in his hair as they crossed the parking lot. Lily looked up at him, eyes wide. "Dad, that was your last $10. He exhaled a laugh that wasn't really a laugh. "Money comes and goes. Kindness shouldn't." She was quiet for a moment, then asked softly, "Do you think she'll pass it on?" He didn't answer right away. "Maybe," he said finally. "Maybe she already has." They walked past the row of flickering streetlights, the world painted in shades of silver and blue. In his pocket, his fingers brushed against the edge of a folded photograph. His late wife holding Lily as a baby, smiling on a summer day that felt like a different life. He'd kept it there as a promise to never let Lily feel that kind of loss again. Behind them, the woman stood by her luxury car, watching through the falling snow. She hadn't expected the man in the oil-stained jacket to step forward, to look at her as if she were just another human being in trouble, not someone untouchable. For a long moment, she didn't move. Then she opened her purse and stared at the black credit card that had inexplicably failed, the irony sinking in. For the first time in years, someone had helped her without wanting anything. She whispered to herself, "Pass it on," and wondered if she even remembered how. By the time Ethan and Lily reached their small apartment above the old garage on 5th Street, the wind had turned brutal. Inside, the space smelled faintly of engine oil and cinnamon, the closest thing he could afford to a holiday candle. He set the bread on the counter, turned on the small heater, and pulled Lily close under a worn blanket. "You did a good thing today, Dad," she murmured sleepily. "Nah," he said, brushing her hair back. "Just trying to keep the world from freezing over." Outside, the snow fell harder, blurring the town into a quiet watercolor of lights and silence. Somewhere in the distance, a black Bentley idled, its headlights cutting through the storm. Inside sat the woman from the grocery line, still clutching her receipt, still thinking about the stranger who had given her something she hadn't known she'd lost: faith. And in that frozen moment, two lives that had drifted worlds apart began, unknowingly, to turn toward each other. Morning came gray and wet, the kind of January rain that soaks through denim and patience alike. Ethan had the garage door half rolled up on 5th Street, breath fogging in the chill as he coaxed life out of a stubborn alternator. The place smelled like coffee burned a little too long and the clean sweetness of motor oil. Lily sat at the workbench under a yellow desk lamp, coloring a picture of a grocery store with a smiling stick figure handing a green rectangle to a woman in a big coat. "That's your 10, Dad," she said without looking up. "Make sure you draw yourself taller," he teased, and she stuck her tongue out before carefully penciling in a tiny heart over the receipt line. The rain thinned to a hiss. Then tires whispered to a stop outside, not the usual battered pickups or dented sedans, but something that carried silence with it, long, black, and impossibly polished. A Bentley. Ethan wiped his hands on a rag and frowned. The passenger door opened. The woman from Riverside Market stepped out beneath a held umbrella, the cream cashmere replaced by a charcoal coat that fit like decision. Behind her, a driver and a security professional took their places with unobtrusive precision. She looked smaller without the fluorescent lights, younger somehow and more tired. "Mr. Miller?" she asked, glancing up at the hand-painted sign, Miller's Auto and Small Engine, before meeting his eyes. "It's Ethan," he said, surprised at the lilt of warmth in his own voice. "And you're all right?" "I am," she replied, softening. "Better than yesterday, thanks to you." Her gaze drifted to Lily. "And you must be Lily." Lily gave a little wave, then hopped down and wiped colored pencil dust on her leggings. "Hi." The woman stepped over the threshold, taking in the cracked concrete floor, the pegboard of carefully organized tools, the photo frames that lined a high shelf. Lily as a toddler, a woman with laughing eyes holding her, a summer evening captured in amber. She held herself with the balance of someone used to boardrooms, but unsure where to put her hands in a place that smelled like real work. "I didn't catch your name yesterday," Ethan prompted gently. She hesitated, then chose a truth. "Clara," she said. "Clara Hayes." It landed without implication until the driver angled his chin and the security man's earpiece flashed. A sheet of quiet stretched tight. Ethan waited. Clara inhaled as if readying herself for a cold swim. "I owe you transparency. I didn't just come to repay $10. She slipped a slender card from a leather case and laid it on the counter. The embossed logo was unmistakable, even to a man who barely had time for the news. Hayes Markets, America's neighborhood grocer. CEO Clara Hayes, the very chain whose little Riverside store had hummed and sputtered under cheap fluorescent light the night before. Ethan blinked once, then twice. Not awe, calibration. He looked from the card to the woman whose card it was, the same woman who had fumbled a payment like anyone else. He let out a breath. "Well," he said after a beat, "that explains the tulips." A surprised laugh escaped her, real and bright. She leaned an elbow on the counter, business armor slipping. "Yesterday, my card didn't fail. I did. I've built systems to make sure people never feel small at our registers, and somehow I've been far from the registers." She met his eyes. You stepped in with $10 you couldn't spare and gave me a kind of grace I couldn't buy. Ethan shook his head. I didn't do it for a headline. I know, she said, voice still. That's why I'm here. She gestured around. What do you need? New lifts? Insulation? A proper heater? Let me do something that actually helps. The offer hung between solvent fumes and rain sound, big enough to crowd the room. Ethan's pride rose like a tide he'd learned to surf. Stand firm, let it pass. He folded the rag once, twice. I appreciate it, he said. But this place, this mess, this is ours. We're getting by. Clara nodded slowly, reading the dignity beneath the rust. She walked the perimeter, fingers trailing an inch above the pegboard, pausing at Lily's drawing. Is this last night? Lily bobbed her head. You were nervous. Dad wasn't. Clara's mouth trembled into a smile. He has a talent for making storms feel survivable. Lily considered that, then scampered to her backpack and returned with a folded cardstock square she'd punched with a wonky star. Inside, a stick family stood under a rainy sky, 3 umbrellas sharing a single handle. In crayon letters, be kind, even when no one's watching. She pressed it into Clara's hands. It's for you. You can keep it in your purse like Dad keeps Mom's picture. Clara touched the star-shaped hole as if it were delicate glass. The card steadied something in her posture. I will, she said, and her voice wasn't quite steady. Thank you, Lily. A phone buzzed somewhere, ignored. Outside, the driver adjusted his cuff and pretended not to see his reflection in the window. Clara turned back to Ethan. You may not want anything, but I still intend to make last night mean more than a receipt. If you won't let me fix something here, let me at least leave you this. She slid the business card across. Direct line. No assistants, no gatekeepers. Ethan glanced at the card and, with a dry half-grin, lifted the lid of his dented red toolbox. He tucked the card beneath a tray of sockets and Allen keys, as if stowing away a delicate part he'd use when the timing was right. I'll call if the tulips need rotating, he said. Or if the heater quits for good. Clara laughed again, quieter this time, private. Deal. She straightened, the CEO settling back over her like a well-cut coat. Thank you for yesterday, Ethan, for reminding me what our name over those doors is supposed to stand for. She bent to Lily. And thank you for the umbrella handle. Lily nodded solemnly, as if conferring a medal. The Bentley door thumped softly. The umbrella swallowed her, and then she was outside, a dark comma against the rainy sentence of the street. Ethan watched the taillights dissolve into gray. He felt Lily's hand find his. Is she a queen? Lily asked. Ethan thought of the card, the rain, the way Clara had held a paper star like it might break. Something like that, he said. But last night, she was just a person. Lily mulled this over, then went back to coloring the bouquet at checkout line number 3. Ethan lifted the alternator again, the work simple and blessedly direct. Still, as the socket clicked onto a bolt, he glanced at the red box, where a sliver of white cardstock showed beneath the tools. He closed the lid gently and told himself he'd only reach for it when there was no other fix left. Outside, the rain eased to a fine mist, a pause in the weather as if the town itself were taking a breath. Somewhere past the river and the mills, a woman in a charcoal coat sat with a child's drawing in her lap and felt, for the first time in a long time, like she had something worth carrying that wasn't measured in profits or press. The weeks that followed blurred into a rhythm of small repairs and quiet evenings. The storm had passed, but inside the garage, there was still a chill that the little heater couldn't chase away. Ethan's hands bore the usual nicks and grease, yet his thoughts were elsewhere. On a woman whose card slept beneath his socket wrench tray, and on a feeling he didn't quite understand. He never called her, but sometimes when the bell above the door jingled, He caught himself looking up too quickly. Clara Hayes had not returned, at least not in the way he expected. When she finally did, it was almost invisible. She came without the Bentley, without the bodyguards, her hair pulled back, her coat replaced by a simple wool jacket. She stood outside for a long moment, before knocking on the open door. "You fix bicycles too?" she asked, holding a rusty old Schwinn like a peace offering. Ethan blinked, surprised but amused. "Only if you're willing to get your hands dirty." She smiled faintly. That's kind of the point. She spent the afternoon learning how to loosen bolts, how to listen for the tiny click that meant metal was ready to move. Her manicured fingers stumbled at first, but Ethan guided her gently, never touching, only pointing, his voice steady and kind. Lily sat cross-legged nearby, coloring as usual, watching the scene unfold with quiet curiosity. "She's not afraid of dirt," Lily whispered later, as if it were a secret worth keeping. By dusk, the bike stood whole again, chain gleaming under the work light. Clara looked at her hands, streaked with oil, nails ruined, and smiled wider than she had in years. "You know," she said softly, "I haven't built anything real in a long time." Ethan poured her a cup of cheap coffee and handed it over. Sometimes fixing things is just another way of remembering how to hold them. That evening she lingered longer than she should have. The heater hummed. The rain started again, a soft percussion on the tin roof. When she finally spoke, her voice was lower, more human. "My son would have loved this place," she said. Ethan paused. "Your son?" She nodded, eyes far away. "He died 4 years ago. Car accident. He was 9. After that, I buried myself in work. Made the company bigger, busier, quieter. Success became a kind of silence." Ethan set down his cup. "I'm sorry." "Don't be," she said quickly. "I just didn't think grief could be repaired." He studied her for a moment, then said quietly, "It doesn't get repaired. It just finds a new purpose." She looked up, surprised. "You sound like someone who's done that." "Still trying," he admitted. "My wife, Emma, cancer took her when Lily was 3. She was the kind of woman who believed even broken things deserved light." He glanced toward the picture frame near the tool shelf, its glass smudged but treasured. "She left me this place in her will, said I'd need something to keep my hands busy when my heart couldn't be." The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was thick with understanding. Clara's eyes softened. "You're raising her on your own?" "Yeah, she keeps me honest. Reminds me to smile when the bills come in." He chuckled, but it carried a shadow. "I wanted to be an engineer once. Had designs, patents even, before the layoffs. Now I make do." Clara looked around the garage again, seeing it differently this time, not as a relic, but as a heartbeat. "You didn't make do," she said. "You rebuilt." Lily patted over, clutching a daisy she'd plucked from a crack in the pavement outside. "Mom loved daisies too," she said, holding it out to Clara. The flower drooped a little, but its white petals shone under the yellow light. Clara took it with both hands, blinking fast. "Mine did too," she whispered. "I mean, my son." The air shifted then, something fragile and holy passing between them. For a moment, Ethan thought he saw the faintest tremor of peace in her expression, like the first breath after surfacing from deep water. They worked in companionable quiet until the rain grew heavy and the garage filled with the scent of wet pavement and coffee. When Clara finally stood to leave, she glanced once more at Lily's daisy now tucked into the edge of her purse. "You and your daughter," she began, then stopped. "You fix more than engines, Ethan." He smiled, brushing a streak of oil from his wrist. "You'd be surprised how many broken things show up here." After she left, the silence returned, but it was warmer this time. Lily yawned and curled up on the old couch. "Dad," she murmured, half asleep, "do you think Miss Clara's heart feels better now?" Ethan looked at the daisy she'd left behind on the workbench. A single petal had fallen, glistening with rain. "Maybe not fixed," he said quietly, "but starting to run again." Miles away, in her penthouse overlooking the city, Clara stood by the window, the daisy on the sill catching the last light. She thought of the grease on her fingers, the laughter in that garage, the small girl who spoke like she'd known loss too early. And for the first time in years, Clara Hayes whispered a prayer, not for success, but for courage to return to where things were real. The first headline appeared on a Monday morning, splashed across the business section of a national paper. CEO Clara Hayes, seen with mechanic in small-town garage. Romantic scandal or PR stunt? By noon, it was everywhere. Photos taken through the open garage door. Clara laughing beside a grease-stained man, Lily handing her a daisy, were circulating with cruel captions. Ethan saw it when a customer slid the paper across the counter, eyebrows raised. "Didn't know you were moonlighting as a celebrity," the man joked. Ethan didn't laugh. His stomach turned cold. Outside, the wind rattled the old sign. By evening, the phone rang. He let it go to voicemail. Across town, in a glass-walled office 40 stories high, Clara stared at her own reflection beside the same headline. Her board of directors was already calling emergency meetings, investors whispering about impropriety. "It's unbecoming for a CEO," one message said. "Optics matter," another reminded her. She felt their words like weights on her chest. Yet beneath the humiliation, another feeling pulsed, fury. Not at Ethan, not even at the press, but at a system that punished empathy like a crime. That night, Clara drove alone to 5th Street. The garage was dark, except for the strip of yellow light beneath the door. Ethan stood inside, sleeves rolled, sorting invoices. When he looked up, she could tell from his eyes that he'd already decided something. "You shouldn't be here," he said quietly. "They're going after you because of me." She shook her head. "Because of me. I came here. I stayed." "You don't owe me an explanation," he said, forcing steadiness. "But maybe some distance, for your sake." The words hurt more than she expected. "You think I care about headlines?" she asked. "You should," he replied. "You've got more to lose." "No," she said, voice cracking. "What I lost, Ethan, you can't print on paper." The sentence hung there, fragile and raw. He sighed, looking away. "You're kind, Clara, but kindness gets twisted in the spotlight, and I can't let Lily see her father dragged through the mud." Before she could answer, a small voice broke the silence. "Dad?" Lily appeared from the back room, clutching her drawing pad. Her eyes flicked between them, then to the newspaper on the workbench. "People are saying mean things about Miss Clara." Ethan opened his mouth, but Clara knelt down first. "Hey, sweetheart. Sometimes people don't understand when grown-ups try to do something good. But we keep doing it anyway, right?" Lily studied her face, then nodded solemnly. "You said kind things change the world. Don't let the world change your kind thing." The child's words landed like truth too pure for argument. The next morning, Clara stood before a wall of cameras in the Hayes Market's headquarters lobby. Flashbulbs fired like static. Reporters shouted questions. Who is the mechanic? Was it charity? Was it love? She lifted a hand, and the room fell quiet. 4 years ago, she began, I lost my son in an accident. Since then, I've hidden behind work and numbers, thinking I could manage grief like a spreadsheet. But a few weeks ago, a man I'd never met gave me his last $10 at one of our stores. He didn't know who I was. He didn't ask for anything. He reminded me that this company was built on decency, not image. A murmur rippled through the crowd. She continued, voice steady now. Yes, I visited his garage. Yes, I got my hands dirty. And if that makes you uncomfortable, perhaps it should. Because compassion is not a scandal. It's a mirror. And if you see something shameful in it, look again. The room went silent. Then a single clap sounded, from one of the veteran employees standing near the back. Another joined, then another, until the applause filled the lobby like thunder rolling over the city. Later that day, the board called off its inquiry. Public sentiment swung, investors praised her courage, and even the tabloids began to reframe the narrative as CEO reconnects with humanity. Yet for Clara, none of that mattered. That evening, she drove once more to the garage, headlights cutting through the drizzle. Ethan was outside tightening a lug nut on a customer's truck. She stepped out before he could speak and pressed an envelope into his hand. Inside was a small, hand-drawn sketch from Lily. 3 stick figures under a banner that read, "Family fixes everything." Clara smiled, a little unsteady. "She mailed it to my office. Guess she wanted to make sure I didn't forget." Ethan looked down at the drawing, then up at her. "She has good timing." "She takes after her dad," Clara said softly. For a long moment, they just stood there, the hum of the city fading into rain. Clara's scarf fluttered in the wind, brushing his sleeve. "Thank you," she whispered, "for giving me something the world tried to take." He nodded, his expression unreadable but kind. "And what's that?" Permission to feel human again. Behind them, Lily peeked from the doorway, her eyes bright. The daisy Clara had given her weeks ago was now pressed in wax paper, preserved on the corkboard. It seemed fitting. Fragile things could survive, if someone cared enough to keep them whole. Spring came early to the river town that year. The snow melted into rushing gutters, and the air smelled faintly of metal and new beginnings. The old garage on 5th Street no longer looked tired. It gleamed. Fresh paint, wide windows, and a new wooden sign that read, "Lily's Workshop, a place to learn, build, and begin again." The transformation wasn't about profit. It was about purpose. Clara Hayes stood beside Ethan in front of the crowd gathered for the ribbon cutting. Local families, reporters, and half a dozen parents clutching job applications. Her tailored blazer was traded for rolled sleeves and work gloves. When she handed Ethan the ceremonial scissors, he shook his head with that shy smile she had come to know. "You started this," she said. "You reminded me why second chances matter." "You gave them to others," he replied. "That's what counts." The idea had come from her public statement weeks earlier. Instead of damage control, Clara had announced a new initiative, converting abandoned Hayes Market warehouses into trade schools and repair workshops for single parents. It was, as she told the press, a return on humanity. Ethan had resisted at first. He wasn't used to being the face of anything, but she'd insisted. "You've lived what we're trying to teach," she told him. "Let them learn from someone who understands what it means to start over." Lily tugged on her father's sleeve. "Dad, can I cut it with you?" she asked, eyes bright. "Of course," he said, kneeling so she could hold the handle too. The scissors snipped through the ribbon, and the crowd erupted in applause. Cameras flashed, but this time the light didn't feel invasive. It felt earned. Clara caught Ethan's glance across the applause. Quiet gratitude, quiet pride. Inside, the workshop was everything Ethan had once dreamed of. 6 workstations, clean air vents, tools hung in precise rows, and a corner where Lily's old couch still sat, a patchwork reminder of their beginnings. Above it hung a framed $10 bill, pressed under glass. Below the bill was a brass plaque engraved with simple words, "Kindness doesn't expire." During the ceremony, Clara stepped up to the small podium. "When a man paid for my groceries with his last $10, she began, I thought I'd repay him with money, but he taught me something better. That dignity is the only real currency. Today, that $10 becomes a promise. Every repair made here, every skill learned, every paycheck earned. It all starts with the same idea. One person choosing kindness when they have every reason not to." Her voice wavered slightly, then steadied. "We can build a lot with that." The audience rose to their feet. Reporters scribbled, children clapped, and somewhere in the back, an older woman wiped her eyes. Ethan stood near the door, arms folded, watching Lily show the new trainees where the wrenches were. He caught Clara's gaze again. No words passed, but everything was said. Later that afternoon, when the crowd dispersed and the sun slipped low, Clara found Ethan in the corner office. A simple space with a desk, 2 chairs, and the smell of sawdust. She placed a small envelope in front of him. "It's not a paycheck," she said. "It's something else." He opened it. Inside was a contract naming him Director of Vocational Programs for the entire Hayes Foundation. "Clara, I don't—" "You do," she interrupted gently. "You've rebuilt more than engines, Ethan. You've rebuilt people." He hesitated, looking out the window where Lily chased bubbles in the golden light. "You think I can handle all that?" "I don't think," she said. "I know." Her tone softened. "Besides, I'll be around to make sure you don't skip meetings." His grin spread slowly. "So, this is your plan? To keep an eye on me?" "Maybe," she said, her voice low. "Maybe it's to make sure I don't forget what real looks like." Before leaving, Lily ran up with something wrapped in tissue paper. "It's for you, Miss Clara," she said. Inside was a small picture frame holding the daisy Clara had once left behind, pressed and preserved. Beneath it was a note in Lily's careful handwriting. "For the next one who needs it." Clara blinked hard. "You're giving this away?" "It's not gone," Lily said, smiling. "It's just starting over." At sunset, the 3 of them stood outside the workshop, the river glinting in the distance. The laughter of families echoed from inside, wrenches clinking, engines sputtering to life. Clara leaned against the doorframe, her shoulder brushing Ethan's. "You ever think $10 could build all this?" she asked. He shook his head. $10 didn't. People did." "Then maybe," she said softly, "we just keep finding more of them." He looked at her, the warmth of the fading sun reflected in her eyes. "Deal." Lily ran up and slipped her small hands into theirs. The 3 stood together as the last light turned the sign above them gold. In that glow, the world felt briefly mended, one act of kindness at a time. Sometimes, it isn't grand gestures that change a life. It's a $10 act of kindness and the courage to keep believing in people. Ethan gave what little he had, and somehow it gave them all a second chance. If this story reminded you that compassion never runs out of change, share it with someone who needs a little hope today. And don't forget to stay with us for more soul-stirring tales where ordinary hearts do extraordinary things.